I'm Danny Shapiro, lead editor of KTAR.FM, and I am here with Scottsdale Police Chief Jeff Walther. We are just going to discuss the ongoing school threats that are happening in Scottsdale, across the valley, across the nation, what can be done, and why they're kind of happening more often than they've really ever happened before. So, Chief, thanks first of all for being here with me.
You bet.
Much appreciated.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I think we'd rather be here under better circumstances, talking about, better programs you're doing or whatever. But it feels like a lot of your resources are being, kind of strained by this ongoing, set of school threats, school violence, everything involved with it. It seems like it's just a greater thing than it ever was before, and this year in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, we're seeing more, and we call them swatting incidents, right? Those incidents or those calls where, and I don't know who coined the term, where you try to get an emergency response or a SWAT response, and it was coined as swatting. But we've seen more of that, this year. We saw a lot last year, but more of that this year than we've seen in preceding years. And it has really exploded over the last month or two, culminating in where we had 2 days in a row, one at Sequoia Elementary School and one at Chaparral High School, major campuses, a lot going on, a lot of students, and it created a lot of chaos.
Yeah, and you've talked about the Sequoia and then the Chaparral one back to back, of course. But we've seen this in Buckeye, we've seen this in Mesa,
all
everywhere.
Over the valley.
Why this year? Is there any rhyme or reason to it?
I just think that it is really just taken on a life of its own. I think that some of our young people saw that this worked in another state or another city, a different school, and this is around the country. And so when you see that really take root, and then I really think, and I don't think we're talking about this enough, I think that then outside hackers, people from other countries, whether you call it domestic terrorism or non-state actors or state actors around the country, come on, let's be honest. We're already in a very divisive year, right? With our elections going on, and be they at the national level or the local level, state level, we have major elections going on, and if we can continue to disrupt and sow the seeds of discontent, or we can really undermine the very fabric of our society, especially with our young people in schools. With a little bit of chaos, we can disrupt a day, a week, a month. We can get into the heads of staff and students at a school. That's what they're doing. And so this has really caught fire when you start to see it days in a row. In fact, after the Chaparral incident, I remember hearing that the next day that there were like 6 incidents in Mesa that happened the next day, not to the same extent, but whether they send pictures of a gun or a written online threat, those are all still the same. Those are all different degrees of swatting incidents, but it's just been incredible how much it has exploded over the last year or so.
Yeah, and there seems to be, in some of these at least, a level of sophistication that's a little greater than just someone sending a photo. I remember you just discussing the Chaparral incident.
Yes.
You said that came from overseas,
It did.
and you guys were very convinced that there was a real possibility that there was someone in that school having hostages. Can you just discuss a little bit about
Absolutely.
the sophistication?
Think of the technology that we can bring or they can bring to bear now in terms of hacking, or whether they're calling directly, or whether they're calling on a Skype call and they share an address of where they are, where they tell the Skype, kind of the national communications center, and then they enter that information into a database, and then it comes to us showing that address. And so, that I shared with Mike Broomhead in an earlier discussion that we now know that call originated in Pakistan. And so, interestingly enough, in that same, we believe, a teenager hit 3 different schools in 3 different states, Chaparral being one of those. And so when you think about that, how do you pick those schools, right?
Yeah.
And so now what we found, and in my criminal intelligence unit, and then we have a great relationship with the FBI Phoenix Field Division. When we work together on these, and really, especially when it's outside the country or outside of our state, you start to see the level of sophistication that some callers and hackers and the like have related to this. Now, interestingly enough, some of the information we got last week is almost a call to action. You see all these different call to actions for different things going on, but it was a call to action by a group that said, hey, tell us what school you go to and if you want your school to be the next target. And so like now they're soliciting young people from around our country to say, hey, I go to XYZ school, hit my school, and here's why. And so that's something we just had never seen before, where it was essentially a call to action, and will disrupt your day and your school with a threat of violence. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that seems to be just another level that makes it difficult for everyone, you guys, students, school, staff, everyone, where if it's one kid in a school, it happens, it's probably going to scare a lot of the other students. Right, there's going to be a level of, I can't do that, I saw what happened, but if it's happening from overseas and it's happening in locations where those repercussions aren't immediately felt or aren't immediately seen, what's really stopping these folks at this point?
Nothing. I mean, I hate to be so brutally honest, but if you don't live in this country and you have a way that you can reach out from literally thousands and thousands of miles away and pick a school and disrupt that campus, with a threat of violence, or it appears that you're at that school through one technology or another, or through, like I said, if you're using Skype and you let that kind of that national communication center know, oh, this is where I am, and that information gets entered in. There's a lot that's going on right now, and there's a lot of mitigation efforts on the part of law enforcement, local and federal law enforcement, to prevent that. But we still have to take all threats seriously, right? It's the I shared at a town hall that Scottsdale Unified School District had last Monday, that if I had 100 of these threats 100 days in a row, well, the 101st day, we still need to respond exactly the way we did the first 100 days, because if the 101st day is real, and we don't respond in the same fashion, lives are lost. Right. Time is of the essence. And so that's why for us, it can be exhausting when you're responding multiple days in a row. But it's, what is the threat? Mm-hmm. What is the threat? And so I've gotten questions on social media about, Chief, why is Scottsdale PD or why are other police departments responding in a very aggressive fashion? And my reply is that we respond based on the severity of the threat, right? You'll see a lot of kids from around the country will repost a picture of a gun, right? And I love that our county attorney, Rachel Mitchell, has a program, Report, Don't Repost. And that whole idea is somebody will get social media, whether it's Instagram or Snapchat or what have you, they will get something, a picture of a gun and it'll say a particular school. Well, then they just scrub that off, put a different school name on it. And what we found is that these pictures are traveling either around the state or around the country. And school names are just taken off and other names put on to disrupt the day. Yeah. When I was a kid, it was, I went to Horizon High School, shout out to the Huskies. There was the rare bomb threat, right? Because somebody didn't want to take their chemistry test that day. And we kind of, brushed that off. Today, you can't brush off threats of violence. And so when a picture is sent, usually then our response is, with our school resource unit and school resource officers, then addressing that or a little bit extra presence at the school to make sure that there is no valid threat. But if you get a call that said, I'm at the school, I'm in, I have hostages, I'm getting ready to start killing people, well, we send everybody.
Yeah. And
we have to keep our young people safe. We have to stop a threat if it's legitimate, and we have to respond in that fashion.
Right. And I kind of want to discuss the toll that it takes. And we'll start with the police department itself. I think for that Chaparral threat, you sent more than 40 officers.
More than 40 officers responded to the Chaparral campus.
In the long run, is that a great use of their time? Obviously, probably not. That's not, you need it. It's, it's necessary. But, for those hour, 2-3 hours, I'm sure the folks in your department would rather be going and dealing with ongoing cases, getting to other calls of service, right. And they're getting stuck, dealing with another hoax threat. So what really is that toll like for you guys to consistently have to deal with?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question, because when you think about, 40 plus officers who are responding to a singular campus that ultimately turns out to be a hoax, those are other calls for service that are now holding. They're holding that we would have had officers available for. Are they medical emergencies? Are they other related emergencies? Now, mind you, if it's an emergency, we're still going to break other people. We're very fortunate to have a lot of resources, but we're going to break people off for those emergencies. But there are all kinds of calls that are holding, or traffic enforcement that's not being done, or collisions that are being moved off to the side, so that we can deal with this emergent issue right now. And so, and then think about the police officers get into this to serve, right, and to help and to respond to calls, to aid people on their worst day, and to protect the community from predators and other criminals. And so now they're responding to a code 3 or license siren to a high stress incident. There's potentially killing going on of young people on a campus. And there's a lot of stress involved in that. And there's a lot of stress involved in policing, period. But now you add these fake stressors, right? It's not real.
Right.
Now the stress is real, the call is not. And so, and then that has a cascading effect. It's the young people at school, it's the staff and the teachers at that school who are now in lockdown, who are in the dark, who are in, bathrooms or in rooms, kind of with the lights turned off, the doors barricaded, and they're hiding in the corner. Those are stressors and events that young people are going to remember the rest of their lives.
Right.
Because at least for a moment they thought, is this it for me? I've seen this on TV. Is this it for me? Is this going to be my last day? And you don't forget stressors like that.
Right, and that was going to be my next question. Obviously, a toll on you and your department, but I mean, even just one incident where you're locked down and you see just loads and loads of police officers at your school, that is not a natural thing that, as a student, as a 13-year-old, as an 8-year-old, that you don't really want to see that, and you don't anticipate seeing that. So just in your discussions with students, with staff, with parents, what is kind of the attitude right now?
People are afraid. I'll use this as an example because you mentioned a 13-year-old and 8-year-old, and at Sequoia, had heard a story of an 8-year-old who was in the bathroom at the time that the lockdown happened, and he sheltered in place in that bathroom, for 10, 12, 15 minutes until officers cleared the campus and got to him. And that, imagine now being not with your fellow students, not with your teacher, but by yourself at 8 years old. And it's personal to me, not just because I'm in a protecting profession, but because I have an 8-year-old grandson. And I imagine my 8-year-old grandson waiting, hunkering down in a bathroom for 10 or 12 or 15 minutes, terrified.
Yeah.
That's going to impact him the rest of his life. And so what you hear from parents and from staff and from others is a level of fear and frustration, right? Frustration that there would be people who are intent on creating this level of disruption, this level of chaos, this level of trauma to our young people, especially our littles, right? Our little kids. Like that is, to me, that's just evil when you're creating that level of trauma in today's day and age, where we're no stranger to active shooter, active killing incidents at schools or businesses or malls or grocery stores, not just in the United States, but in other places around the world. And so there's a lot of apprehension. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And how do you stop this, especially when it happens from outside the country, or there's a technology that are people using to try to mask themselves and where they are, with the sole goal of just completely disrupting, an educational institution and our children.
Yeah. And I know you've talked on the Mike Broomhead Show, and I'm sure this message has got a little wider as well, but you've talked about wanting to bring back shame when it comes to, these people and, all these incidents. What does that look like for you?
It's funny, when you say that, I see in my own mind's eye my public information sergeant, Allison Semps, is cringing when I talk about bringing shame back. And I did with a press conference and with Mike a couple different times. But, when it comes to young people who are perpetrating this crime, right, juveniles, so under the age of 18, I think that the media, social media, law enforcement, we've taken a very soft approach at not using their name, not posting their name, not showing their picture. Mm-hmm. And my discussion about bringing shame back was exactly that. And I think there's a sheriff in Florida who talked about doing a perp walk.
I think he did do the perp walk.
With a 12-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's, you might get backlash for it. It's okay. That brought shame back, right? This is whether they're 12 or they're 15. If they're committing this crime, if they are upsetting, or disrupting an educational institution, literally, when you look at Chaparral High School, it's 1,750 students with probably another 250 staff. So you're talking about near 2,000 people who are all terrified, who are all locked down, whose parents now are running en masse to the high school thinking that something has gone on, or worse yet, and if it can be even worse, the day before at Sequoia Elementary School, when you have kindergarten, through 6th grade. Those are littles.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you have juvenile suspects that we know they're suspected, we have probable cause, they've been arrested, why hide their identity?
Yeah.
They wanted to be famous or infamous. By all means, let's accommodate them. So even if that there has to be that accountability piece to that, and if they're held accountable within the confines of the judicial system, that's great. But there also must be some accountability at the social level. And so if that means your little Johnny is named in the media and his pictures out there, maybe that might dissuade somebody else from doing it due to that very negative media coverage. And so I'm all for that. If you disrupt and cause trauma at that level, then we ought to bring shame back in a whole lot of ways in our country, because that seems to be absent today. Yeah.
So would Scottsdale do that then? If you arrest a 13-year-old, 12-year-old, something like that, would you release their name? Would you do, and I know we really, Arizona is not known terribly recently for doing perp walks.
This is where I wish I was the sheriff as an elected official and not an appointed official. But that's something that absolutely I would have some discussion with my city attorney and the county attorney. Yeah. And I would very much voice my opinion on the direction I think that we should go with that. Absolutely.
Okay. And we've talked about so much regarding this. We haven't talked about the raw numbers, though. Do you have those by chance? Do you know how many school threats I
actually don't have the raw numbers, the actual data with me today. It's something I can absolutely get.
Okay.
What I can tell you anecdotally, as it's been a significant increase in my city, in Phoenix, in Mesa, in Buckeye, and you see arrests being made all around, not just around the valley, in places around the state, and certainly around the country, in numbers that we just have never seen before.
Yeah, and I think the question everyone has also is, when is this going to end? At some point, there's either going to be some sort of decrease or some breaking point, but it won't go on like this forever, right? Or
I hope not. I'd be curious to see, and we can talk about this after the election in November. I will be curious to see if the numbers start to decline. Mm-hmm. Simply because if what we've seen in certainly in a general election, every 4 years, but and we didn't see this really in the midterms. But it seems like when you look at 2020, a lot of, the pandemic and civil and social unrest, and now 4 years later, you just see different things, different major events happening. But you see still, I think, a real desire, both internally and external to this country, a desire to really sow the seeds of discontent and division and chaos. And how can we do that? Well, let's do it with young people at schools and our institutions, right? Mm-hmm. When you can start to disrupt our major institutions with a phone call or a picture or a threat of violence or, that shows that you're on scene, I'll be curious to see if that ends after, or I don't think it's going to end, or slows down after our election cycle is over. Or if it continues to destabilize this country and all of our major institutions. So I know this is where I'll start getting blown up from conspiracy theorists. Will start, the chief's this or he's that. I think all you have to do is just pay attention to what's gone on in the last 4 or 5 years, and look to, and you should ask yourself a question: what's different? Why are all of these individual things happening? Is there a collective reason for that? And so this, to me, is just yet another example of others trying to destabilize or really get in and undermine the fabric of our society in this country. And how do you do that? Yeah. You go with some of our major institutions, whether it be medical, governmental, institutions of learning and higher learning. You look at the protests that are going on campuses, around the country, and does that destabilize institutions? And so it does. Right or wrong, we can agree or disagree on the reasons for the protests, but if you look at it and sit back and say, how many of our major institutions are really being destabilized, and look at the division in that, that's what's most concerning for me as a 30-year police professional is what's next? Yeah. Is it going to slow down? Is it going to get worse? And what's the next major institution? Yeah, and speaking of major institutions, are schools targeted just because there's younger people in there? There's just a greater sense of urgency to get to them, or why schools? I think all the above. I think when you look at a school system, right, there's so many I think iconic components of a school system, right? It's our young people. Who do we want to protect more than anybody else? The young and the innocent. Yep. And so we want to protect them first and foremost. That's the future of our republic, right? That's the future of our country is our young people. You want to get to them as quickly as possible because they're young and innocent, the future of our country. And then it's an institution. And so there are those who are I think hell bent on disrupting governmental institutions and really getting into that fabric of society. I think that the police, as those who are kind of stand to protect and serve people, they want to protect kids first and foremost. Sure. And then you have other kids, usually older, 12 and beyond, who for one reason or another, I think there's a lot of social media and media component of that. I want to be seen and heard. I want to be famous, or if I can't be famous, I'll be infamous. And so I want to disrupt. And so you and I talked about shame a little while ago, right? Yeah. There is none. There is none. So if I disrupt an institution, then look at me. Look what I did. I have power where I didn't have power before. Right. And so I think that there's a lot going on here. And I think that an educational institution where a lot of young people are, there can be, a half dozen or a dozen reasons why it's a great spot to commit your nefarious activities. But it also breaks the heart of the country when there is an active shooter, an act of violence, when young innocent people are killed. It really tears at the heart and the fabric of this country, because that's the future. And so that's why I think that a lot, past mass shooters have targeted schools, because they know how much that hurts the country and hurts the people in our country.
Yeah. And just, I think this is going to be the last one for me, but say after the election, we don't see a decrease in this in Scottsdale or even across the nation. Is there going to be a breaking point at some point, or is there going to be just a greater, I know obviously there already is a greater focus, but will there be even a greater focus on really stopping this? Because I'm sure you just do not want to deal with this the rest of your time.
Yeah, I think that we've put a great focus on it today. And I think that if it continues at the same pace, certainly at the same pace we're seeing right now, we're going to continue to throw more and more intelligence assets at it. We're going to be much more, I think, even more vocal about it. We talked about the perp walk.
Yeah.
We're going to be very intentional about putting names and faces out there who are committing these horrendous acts at our institutions. I think this is already a discussion point is, do you have a school resource officer or an armed person at every single school? That becomes very difficult, right?
Yeah.
When I have 60 different schools in Scottsdale, and I have 10 school resource officers and a sergeant. Well, I have 3 school security officers at other locations: Scottsdale Unified School District, Cave Creek Unified School District, and Paradise Valley Unified School District, that all have schools in Scottsdale, have on-site security staff. But we're going to have to continue. If this continues unabated, we're going to have to continue to have conversations of who do we put where, how many more do we hire, how many more security personnel are we hiring, just to ensure that every single school has some degree of a security officer, a police officer, a school resource officer. And then we are having a lot of discussion and have gained a lot of traction on access control in our schools. It's why, sadly, some of the schools today look like prisons, because it's all about access control and who can get on campus and who can't. Mm-hmm. And so these are discussions that not only have we implemented changes already, but there now have to be more discussions, especially if this continues unabated.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was our discussion with Scottsdale Police Chief Jeff Walther. More coming on KTAR.com, 92.3 FM later this week. Chief, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.